Welcome to Trucks. I've got a cool project planned for you today. Now, if you're a regular viewer of the show, you've probably been following along on some of the build-ups, like the Hairy Hauler or Crazy Horse. And they'll be back here in the near future. But for now, well, the Hairy Hauler's in the paint booth waiting its turn. And of course, the frame of Crazy Horse, well, it's at the sandblaster. So this is the perfect time to start a new build-up. And you are going to love this one. First of all, it's going to be a hot street truck. Second of all, it's going to deal with one of the most popular body styles of truck ever built, the 67 through 72 Chevrolet. One of the reasons why these trucks are so popular is the styling is just so cool, man. Everybody likes these things. Now, the suspension is modern enough to where you don't have to subframe them. They're relatively easy to find, pretty inexpensive, and you can build them stock, completely custom, or a combination of both, like this prime example that belongs to Dave Clark of Fresno, California. But one of the best things about these trucks is, since they're so popular, you can get almost any piece for these things in the aftermarket. Matter of fact, if you start with just the cab and the frame, you can build this truck, and most of it is just bolt-on stuff. Now, I know a lot of you are probably saying, oh, now wait a minute, no, the whole truck? You gotta prove that to me. Well, I thought you'd probably say that. So, the only way to prove it to you is to build one, and that is exactly what we're gonna do. Okay, what I'm starting with is literally a 67 cab, a frame, and of course a title. You got to have a title. You don't have a truck without that. Now, if you look around and do a little bit of wheeling and dealing, you can find a decent cab and frame for around 500 bucks, give or take a little bit. Now, if you take the cab down, have it stripped and primered, have the frame sandblasted like we did, well, you can literally be into one of these things for about 1,000 bucks. Once again, give or take a little bit, and that is a good starting point. Now, one big question that people always ask is, do you have to box the frame for strength? The answer is no. Remember, a lot of these trucks came from the factory with the big block, so the frames are plenty strong. You can leave that just the way it is. Now, the first thing that you need to decide about any project is what direction you're going to go. Now, this project is going to be nice and low and smooth, but it's not going to detract from the original classic lines of the truck. Going to pretty much be the ultimate cruiser, but it's not just going to be about looks. Under the hood is going to be lethal. Matter of fact, that's why I'm calling this project Copperhead, because just like the snake, it doesn't have any rattles to warn you that he's around. There's no way you're going to know what's under that hood until it's too late and you have been had, and I own your pink slip. Okay, to upgrade our suspension, we went to a place called Early Classic Enterprises. You need to write that down. We got their whole front end rebuild kit. Now this includes lower ball joints, upper ball joints, tie rod ends, idler arm, pitman arm, shocks, heck, everything. We even got a kit to rebuild the upper control arms. Now this includes a pivot shaft, bushings, and of course the seals. Now the good thing about Early Classics kits, they include all the hardware, right down to the castle nuts and the cotter pins, and that is a really nice touch. To install the new pivot shafts into the stock control arms, you just slide them into place, then take your seals, put them on your bushings, and then just thread the bushing onto the shaft. Now, it is very important that you keep that pivot shaft centered in that control arm. So you'll need to keep checking it as you tighten those ends down. Then all you have to do is bolt on your upper ball joint and you're done. Now, for the lower ball joints, those need to be pressed in. So do not try to do this with a hammer. You'll need to take it down. A good machine shop just charge you a few bucks to have that done. Now, once your A-arms are assembled, all you got to do is bolt them on the chassis. The top control arm bolts right to the factory studs on the chassis. I'm going to use about 3 shims on each stud to give us a nice starting point for our alignment. Now the bottom control arm, it's just held in place with these U-bolts that come with the kit. Next, we're ready for springs and spindles. Now we had to have something that'll give Copperhead just the right stance. Not too low, but stock height won't work either. So we went back to Early Classic Enterprises got a set of their 2-inch drop spindles. Now these are the strongest spindles on the market. They've got a lifetime warranty to back them up. And that's a good thing because all the weight on the front of your truck is balanced on these little stubs. Now we're going to use those together with a 1-inch drop coil spring. That's going to give us a nice 3.5-inch drop for that nice slinky, slithery look that we got to have. All right, to install the springs and spindles, just slide in the spring, make sure it seats up in the top pocket, then bolt on your spindle. Now, if you're working on a bare frame like this, you're not going to have enough weight, so you're going to have to add something so you can jack up this lower control arm, compress that spring so you can bolt this spindle on. Now, to tie those two spindles together, we're going to bolt on the tie rod ends and the idler arm and the pitman arm, and those just bolt into the stock location. Now this is one area that a lot of people overlook when they're restoring an old truck, and they end up with a truck that wanders all over the road. Now these parts are inexpensive and they really should be the first thing that you replace on a restoration. Now we're going to take a break, and after the break we are going to continue Project Copperhead. Now we've already got most of our brand new front suspension pieces on, but there are still a couple things I need to talk to you about. Now for our steering box, we went back to early classic Enterprises, got one of these awesome quick ratio power steering boxes. Now this thing obviously bolts right to the stock holes, but it turns from lock to lock in 3.5 turns. The stocker is 4.5. Now this doesn't come with any particular kit. It's definitely worth the extra money though to go ahead and get one of these and put it on, especially if you're going to stuff a big old heavy big block under the hood. I know you're dying to know what's going in here. Now the last thing that we're going to put on the front is a sway bar. Now the kit from early classic Enterprises is just the ticket. Now it features a huge 1.25-inch bar and of course all the polygraphite bushings and hardware you need to bolt this thing in. I'll tell you, you add this to a lowered suspension and your truck will handle like it's on rails. Now one of the problems with dropping an early C10 truck is that the sway bar is going to hang down. It looks kind of like a growth down under there. It doesn't look real good. So the kit comes with these brackets. What that does is raise the bar up against the truck for a really cool, clean look. Like everything so far, it just bolts right into place. That takes care of our front suspension for now. Now we're going to deal with the rear and these big old trailing arms and the springs. Now we got new polygraphite bushings from early classics for this pivot point in these trailing arms. Just grease them up real well. Tap them in place. Now for the springs, we also got drop springs so the rear of the truck sits down low like the front. The arms just slide into the stock location. Then jack up the arm and bolt the spring between the arm and the frame. All right, now we are ready for the rear end. Now since we are going to put a significant amount of horsepower under the hood of Copperhead, hint hint, enough to churn a stock axle into a pile of dust, well, we went to Drivetrain specialists and had them put together a huge Dana 60 for us. Now, this thing features massive 35 spline axles, a 373 gear, and a power lock posi are stuffed inside. And then they also put on the girdled cover that's got preload bolts that go down onto the carrier bearings, and this keeps the housing from flexing. Now, if we tear something like this up, well, we've done something. Now, for brakes, we went to Aerospace Components, got their really trick rear disc brake kit. This thing features polished aluminum 4-piston calipers, drilled and slotted rotors, and of course all the bracketry to just bolt this onto your rear end. Now, speaking of a brake, we need to take one, but don't go too far because we're going to be right back onto this project. We'll see you in a minute. Now we've already got new suspension components on the front and on the rear of this old Chevy. Now it's time to deal with this big old Dana 60 axle. Now I've already got it jacked into place and sitting over the top of the trailing arms, But I don't have these saddles welded to the axle tubes yet, and there's a reason for that. Now, once you weld those on, you permanently set your pinion angle. But the only way to properly set the angle of your pinion is with the chassis sitting at ride height. So I'm going to have to wait at least until I have a drivetrain in this thing before I can weld those on. But it doesn't mean I can't go ahead and assemble it for you. Now, this trailing arm system on these old trucks is very much like a heavy-duty ladder bar system, which means you got to have some sort of lateral support to keep this axle from moving side to side. Now, it came from the factory with a pannered bar that ran from the frame rail to the center chunk. But we've changed the axle and we've also dropped the truck, which means we need something better. So we went back to Early Classic Enterprises and got one of their super track bar kits. This eliminates all the geometry problems that arise when you drop the rear of one of those old C10s. Now, the kit includes an adjustable track bar, hardware, and of course the brackets. But while we're in there, we went ahead and got one of their shock relocation kits too. Now, this not only comes with high-performance gas shocks, but also all the brackets and hardware to mount these in. To install the track bar, take the bracket that comes with the kit, slide it between the axle and the trailing arm on the passenger side. Now, to make sure that everything stays even, you've got this spacer that you've got to stick into the driver's side in the same place. Then, we'll take our shock relocation bracket, slide it onto the U-bolt, and then just bolt it up. Then, we'll just bolt in the track bar. Now, just like the pinion angle, this chassis needs to be sitting at ride height before you can get your final adjustment with that track bar. So we just have it ballparked for now. We're going to finish everything up with the shocks and we're done. Now, one final very important thing. These new axles like this are always shipped empty. So you're going to want to put in a good quality gear lube like this Royal Purple Synthetic before you try to drive this thing down the road. Now, it's easy to forget, so do it now. Welcome to the truck shop. Now, you might as well just plan it down for the next 30 minutes or so, because if you've ever been interested in rebuilding or restoring an old classic truck, well, you're going to want to see this show. Now, last week we started a buildup on a little 67 Chevy pickup. Started with nothing but a nice solid cab, a bare frame, and of course a clear title. And we're going to call this project Copperhead. Now, the first thing that we did is totally rebuild the front suspension, the springs, spindles, steering, and in the meantime we also picked up a 3.5-inch drop. Then we moved to the back, rebuilt the rear suspension, picked up a 4-inch drop, and also stuck in a huge Dana 60 rear axle so we can handle some serious horsepower. Now we're going to continue the build-up right where we left off. Now, when you're rebuilding an old truck, you really need to put some serious consideration into what you're going to do about your gas tank. Now, the reason for this is these old trucks had the gas tank behind the seat in the passenger compartment. Not the most desirable situation. So, to make things a lot safer and to give us a little more leg room, we're going to relocate the tank from behind the seats to the rear frame rails. Now, the tank we're going to use is from Kent Performance, and it's this handmade aluminum piece. Got the mounting flanges already installed. All the bungs you're ever going to need for fuel injection or carburation, whatever, are already on there. We'll just plug the ones we don't use. Sending unit is already installed, and the filler neck is here on top, which means to get to this, we're going to have to go through the bed floor. All right, to mount this tank, first of all, clamp it into place, then just drill through the mounting flange, through the frame, and bolt it on. Now, before you bolt it on, make sure you take a little strip of rubber and put it between the tank and the frame so you got a little bit of cushion there. All right, since we're here at the back of the truck, now is a good time to start thinking about some sort of hitch so we could tow a trailer if we needed to. Well, we didn't have to think very hard because Early Classic Enterprises has got this super slick Class 4 hidden receiver hitch. Now, installation is really easy. It just bolts to existing holes in the frame. And the best part about it is it's a hidden hitch. Nothing looks worse on a nice, slick, classic truck than a big hitch hanging down. Now this one bolts up tight against the frame, and it's hidden behind the bumper or a roll pan. Now the way you get to it is you have a flip-down license plate. That is cool. Okay, now we're going to talk about front brakes. I've got a couple of options here for you. First, I've got a kit from Early Classic Enterprises. Now it includes everything you're going to need to completely upgrade your front brakes. It comes with these huge drilled rotors, new calipers and pads, brake hoses, dust shields, master cylinder, proportioning valve, that's really nice, all the lines, all the hardware, all the bearings to put this thing in and go. Now this kit goes for about 800 bucks, and that includes the spindles. That is a smoking deal. Now if you drive your truck every day, if you tow a trailer, if you go out to the drag strip once in a while, this is the kit that you want. Now let's say that you want something a little more fancy than that, show situation, or you're going to be running some road courses, or maybe you spend a lot of time on the other side of 100 miles an hour. Well, you're going to want to upgrade a little more than that. Early Classic Enterprises has this kit from Aerospace Components that features these really cool polished aluminum 4-piston calipers, drilled and slotted removable rotors, all the hardware and bearings, and check out this polished aluminum tapered hub. This will fit just about any custom wheel out there. Now, of course, since Copperhead's going to be very fast, this is the kit we're going to use. But I need to warn you, this kit's a lot more expensive than that one, and it doesn't just bolt on like that one does. But now you've got two different choices, two different price ranges, and two completely different applications. Now, we're going to show you how to put this on. Now, the first thing we need to do is modify those spindles so we can mount that new caliper. Now, these ears that held the original caliper, well, those need to be cut off. And we've got us a template to show us where to make our cuts. Now, to mount the caliper, you got some good news and bad news. The good news is these original holes are in the perfect spot to mount a new caliper. The bad news is they're the wrong size, so they're going to have to be drilled out and retapped. When you're using a tap, make sure that you use plenty of cutting lube and go slow so you don't break the tap or thread it crooked. Once you're done with your grinding, and it looks like you've completely destroyed your spindles, check with your caliper to make sure that you've got enough clearance, and we got just a little more to go. Then you're ready to start putting things together. But we need to take a break first, but don't go too far because we are going to be right back on this project. Welcome back to Trucks. We are coming down the home stretch of building a really cool chassis for Project Copperhead. Now before the break, put on a cool trailer hitch and a custom gas tank. Now these were both pretty much just bolt-on applications. Then we had to do some modifications to our new spindles to mount these really trick front disc brakes. Now that our modifications are done, well, it's time to put these guys on. So here we go. Pack and install the bearings. Then tap in the inner seal. Then install the caliper mounting bracket to the spindle. Follow that with the freshly greased hub and rotor combination. Finally, bolt on your calipers, slide in your pads, and your brakes are on. Now look at these. These are awesome. Of course, those fancy brakes need to be plumbed, so we went back to Early Classic Enterprises, got their complete brake and fuel line plumbing kit. Now, these aren't just a bunch of old lines that you have to bend and form. These are stainless steel, pre-formed lines that go right in the stock locations. Check this out. All the fittings and flares are already done. Now, using a kit like this can save you hours of cutting and flaring and fitting. Now, like I said, these lines are pre-bent to slide right into the stock locations. But don't be surprised if you have to do just a little bit of bending to make them just perfect. Once you have your lines in, well, that pretty much takes care of the chassis of Project Copperhead. Now, while you're checking it out, I've got some numbers I'm going to give you. Now, if you use the other early classics brake kit, stock rear end, and the stock gas tank, well, you can build a chassis like this for around $1,800. That is a smoking deal. Now, of course, ours is a little more expensive with that rear axle and those front brakes, but that's the magic about these trucks. They're so popular, you can build them any way you want. You got 1,000 different choices. Unfortunately, the only choice we've got now is to take another break, so we'll see you right after this. Welcome back to Trucks and the buildup of our chassis for Project Copperhead. Now that we've got everything assembled, we come to the crowning touch. The part that really sets the personality to any vehicle, and that is the wheels and tires. Now for tires, we went to Toyo and got these Proxus STs because they're a very high performance street tire. They've got a really cool directional aggressive tread, and they've actually got a sidewall rating for trucks, so they're good and strong. Now the size we're going to use in the front is 255 60R17, and in the rear we're going to use these great big 285 60R17s. Now that is going to give us a really cool look. It's also really going to fill those fender wells out. Now for wheels, we had to have something cool. So we made a call to Colorado Custom and got a super trick set of these Lazier 5-spokes. Now notice they've got a real unique shape in the spoke and the hub, but take a good look at those spokes. There's little flutes cut right into them. That is really cool. Not only that, but it'll just sparkle like a diamond when the light hits it. Of course, everything is completely polished. Now the size that we're using on the front, 17 by 8. Size on the rear, 17 by 9.5. But that's not all. Oh, there's more. Come and check this out. Colorado Custom also makes custom steering wheels to match the regular wheels. Now, so we had to have a Lazier wheel. Now it matches the wheels in the polished aluminum and the spokes, but they also will put on custom leather to match whatever color your interior is going to be. Man, that is awesome. Now, you're probably wondering why I didn't stick 20s or 22s on this thing. There's no doubt that the big diameter wheels look really cool, but this is going to be a real high performance truck. It's going to be driven hard and fast. So I need a tire that's got some sidewall to it, and 17s give me a lot of choices. Not only that, they look killer. Well, there you have it, the complete rolling chassis of Project Copperhead. Now hopefully this gives you some ideas and some options on how to build something like this for yourself. Now, unfortunately, I gotta tell you, there's only going to be one Copperhead, and I'm going to show you why next week. But I can give you a hint, so come on back here. You see this crate? This is the poison for Copperhead. Now this is the biggest, baddest crate engine that Chevy, Ford, Dodge, anybody has ever put out. Oh, man. And you're going to have to wait till next week to see it, which means you better not miss next week's show. Oh, the suspense. We need to put a drivetrain in our '67 Chevy truck. Now, for those of you that don't know anything about this project, let me bring you up to date on what we've done so far. Now, the first thing that we did is completely upgrade the front and rear suspension and brakes with kits from Early Classic Enterprises. Then we put in a huge Dana 60 and brakes from DTS. Now, it is time for the drivetrain, but not just any old drivetrain. Now, keep in mind, this project is called Copperhead, and I've been teasing you the last couple weeks, telling you that that engine is going to be super nasty. And just how bad? Well, let's go take a look at it. Okay, you've probably guessed that the engine I'm going to use on this project is some sort of Chevy crate engine, and you'd be right. But before I show you what it is, I need to tell you how this thing came into existence. Now, a few years ago, when crate engines started to get popular, Well, Chevy came out with their huge 502. Man, it was great. It was the biggest thing out there. Well, it wasn't long until Ford came out with their 514. Man, it was great. Everybody loved that. Well, Dodge decided to get in on the act, and they not only reissued the Hemi, but they punched it out to 528 cubic inches. Everybody was happy about that. Everybody except Chevy. They were not happy. Matter of fact, they were ticked off because the 502 was now the smallest big block out there. So they decided it was time to pull out the big stick and kick some butt. And this is what they came out with. What you're looking at is a 572 cubic inch crate engine. It's kicking out 620 horsepower and 650 foot-pounds of torque. Now wait a minute, let me repeat that to you. This is a 572 cubic inch engine. It's been dynoed at 620 horsepower at the flywheel, and it's kicking out 650 foot-pounds of torque. Now, I know those numbers can be a little bit mind-boggling, but wait a minute, it gets even better. This thing is pulling 9.5 to 1 compression, and it's pulling those kind of torque and horsepower numbers on 93 octane pump gas. Which means this thing won't overheat in traffic, it'll idle in traffic. It's street legal. And you can buy one in the crate. Now, let me put this in perspective for you. Most of the classic muscle cars of the 60s had 450 horsepower under the hood. The awesome Shelby Cobra had around 500. Even the Dodge Viper only kicks out around 500 horsepower. Am I making my point? Nobody has built a more powerful crate engine. Now, this thing has been in development for over a year, and what you're looking at is the very first production engine. We got it before any of the magazines, any of the other TV shows. We got the very first one for Project Copperhead. Matter of fact, most people don't even know this thing exists, including Ford and Dodge, which means that if they're watching the show, they just spilled their pretzels all over them and they're running for the phone in a state of panic. I love it. Now, as you can see, this is a gearhead's dream of all the best stuff. You got forged steel crank and rods. You've got forged aluminum pistons. You have huge aluminum heads filled with monstrous valves. You have a special tall deck intake topped with a Demon 850 carburetor. You also have an HEI distributor, wires, plugs, everything's installed. This is ready to drop in and go. Now, so you don't mistake the new 572 for any other big block, they come with special valve covers and they're all powder coated orange. Okay, if you are not weak in the knees yet, well, just bear with me because you will be. Now, the question that comes up is what kind of transmission do you put behind an engine like that? A motor like that would snap most transmissions like a matchstick. Well, we went to B&M and got one of their super strong Turbo 400s, had them put a shift kit in it, and we also had them put on their Trick aluminum pan. That'll help out in the cooling department. Now, to go with that, we also got one of their 2500 stall torque converters, a new transmission mount, their super cooler to keep everything cool for us, and finally their light truck mega shifter so we can control the whole thing. Now, this combination will easily handle the output of that monster motor. To install the torque converter, pour in a quart of tranny fluid. Now, we are using B&M's synthetic trick shift because it is specially formulated for performance transmissions. Now, make sure that you're well lubed around this stub shaft as well as this seal so you don't rip it when you put the torque converter in. Then take the torque converter, just slide it onto the input shaft. There we go. Now, make sure that the torque converter seats all the way in. Now, it needs to sit at least 7/8 of an inch behind the face of the bell housing. Very important. If you don't get it seated all the way in, when you bolt that transmission to your engine, you're going to destroy the pump inside the transmission, so make sure you do it. Now, we are ready to bolt this to that big old engine. We'll take care of that during the break. After the break, we're going to drop it all into the chassis. Make sure you come back. Welcome back to the shop. Now, if you're just joining us, well, shame on you. You've missed some really important stuff. First, we gave the world its first public viewing of Chevy's humongous 572 crate engine. Then, we bolted a Turbo 400 from B&M behind it for a bulletproof drivetrain. Now, we're going to put that whole assembly into the chassis of Project Copperhead. Now, obviously, we've got to have some motor mounts and a transmission crossmember to hold that combination, but it's not as tough as you think. Remember, the 67 through 72 trucks, one of their options was a big block. So, we made a call to Early Classic Enterprises, got one of their transmission crossmembers, a couple of new motor mounts, and their engine pedestals. All right, the first thing we'll do is bolt the engine pedestals into the chassis. Then I'll get this new crossmember into place. I'll follow that by bolting the motor mount to the engine. Then just lower the engine and tranny into place and bolt it in. Man, is that awesome or what? Man. Now, like I said before, that built Turbo 400 tranny is the only thing that's going to be able to handle that kind of power output. A 700 R4 would not have a prayer. Now, a lot of you guys might be thinking, well, that's too bad, because it'd be kind of nice to have that overdrive like a 700 R4 has when you're tooling down the interstate. And that would be right. So, we are going to put an overdrive behind this, but something that'll handle that kind of power output. Come on over here. This is the gear vendor's overdrive. Now, this thing bolts right behind the transmission, and it'll handle up to 1,200 horsepower. Now, the kit includes the adapter, a new yoke, all the harnesses and hookups, and of course, the overdrive unit itself. Now, the best part about this is you can shift it manually. Now, let me show you how this thing works. Okay, with the overdrive in the automatic position, you get a 22% overdrive. This is like having a whole extra gear on the top end. Very similar to a 700 R4. Now, let's say you want to shift this thing manually. Well, you can get this foot switch, or you can get this really cool shifter handle with the button installed. Kind of like nitrous, but this is a lot better. Let me show you how. Say you shift down to first, go to first overdrive. Second, second overdrive. Third, third overdrive. Say you're getting ready to climb a steep hill and you need to go down to second, but second's going to be too low. Go to second overdrive. This thing literally turns your 3-speed into a 6-speed. Now, this is great if you're road racing or drag racing, or if you're hauling or towing equipment or trailers or trail riding, even serious rock crawling. Now you've got some shifting choices. I'm going to show you how easy it is to put that overdrive in, but I'm going to have to wait till after the break. We'll see you in a few minutes. Welcome back to Trucks and our awesome drivetrain for Project Copperhead. Now, we already have the engine and transmission in. Now it is time to deal with that overdrive. Now, to install the gear vendor's overdrive, this stock tail shaft has got to come off. Grease the bushing and the seal in the extension, and then install the extension. Then grease the coupler inside and out, and then slide it into the extension onto the transmission tail shaft. Then just slide the overdrive unit on and bolt it up. Okay, that takes care of the installation of this overdrive unit, but not the overall installation. Up to now, we have been really lucky that this engine and transmission and stuff is just pretty much bolted into place. But as you can see, we got a little problem here. Overdrive is hitting this cross member, but the solution looks pretty easy. So we're just going to jack up the transmission, and we'll just tap this cross member forward until the tranny mount sits right down on top of it. Well, that seemed like a pretty easy fix. Now, in doing this, we have actually raised the mounting point of the transmission about 1 inch. Now, there's some things you need to be really aware of when you start doing this. First, you need to make sure that the engine has the proper tilt to the rear, about 3 to 4 degrees. Oh, that's right on. Number 2, take some measurements, make sure that your transmission assembly is not going to hit the floor of the cab. If it is, you need to lower the mount or modify the floor of the cab. And number 3, take an old drive shaft, make sure that you are going to have clearance through the cross member, through the full range of motion. Now this is going to be close, but we have plenty of room. Okay, now that we've got everything fitting properly, we'll go ahead and just re-drill our holes in our cross member, and we will bolt this sucker on. Finally, now that we have the drivetrain in, we can lower the rear of the chassis down to ride height, according to the measurements we got from Early Classic Enterprises. Then we'll center up the axle and set the pinion angle to match that of the output of the overdrive. Then we'll just weld these perches onto the axle. Oh yeah, that looks good. All right, another thing we're going to deal with today is the issue of headers. Now for those, we went to Sanderson, got a set of these long tube headers for the 67 through 72 Chevy truck with the big block. Now, like all Sanderson headers, they have a very thick flange, so that's not going to warp on you. They have a nice smooth bend, so these things will flow like a mother. And they also have the jet hot coating, so they'll always look good. Now, the big question is, how well are they going to fit that new 572 block? And the answer is, well, like a glove. The engineers at Sanderson did their homework on these. And you can see we've got just enough room to clear everything. All right, that finishes up the drivetrain for Project Copperhead. Is this awesome or what? Man, I told you it was worth the wait. Now we're going to finish up some of the details on the frame here to get it ready for the cab that's coming out of the paint booth here in a week or so. Now, details. Now that is an area that can absolutely make or break a big project like this. It's also an area where most people get in a hurry, start hacking things together because they're impatient, want to finish the project, or they ran out of money because they forgot about the details. Everybody knows you need an engine and a tranny and a rear end and of course wheels and tires. But that's not all there is to it. No, man, you still need to put on brackets and pulleys and a fuel system and an exhaust system. Oh, there's a lot to do, and I'm going to show you how to lay these systems out, and in the meantime introduce you to some really cool products that you can use on your project. So hold on, because this is where it all starts to come together. First up is the engine. Now, just in case you've forgotten, this is Chevrolet's brand new 572 cubic inch crate engine. It's kicking out 620 horsepower and over 650 foot-pounds of torque. It's also the very first one ever made. So yeah, it's pretty special. But all that aside, it's also a really good example of what you get when you buy a new engine. Very rarely do you ever get pulleys and brackets and hardware, but that's okay, because the answer is over here on the table. The name to know here is Zoup's Products, and we're using what they call the super cool pulleys. Now these are available for big block and small block Chevys. They're forged aluminum, so they're very strong and they're highly polished, but they're not just for looks. They overdrive the accessories, so the engine will run 15 to 20% cooler. Also, your alternator and air conditioning will work better at lower RPMs. Check out the bow ties built right into the pulley. See, it's all about the details. The next question is, what about brackets? Well, you can go to a junkyard or a swap meet hoping and praying that you're going to find something that would work, or you can go to Zoup's and get these really cool aluminum brackets that hold alternators and air conditioning compressors and power steering pumps, and they bolt right here to the front of the engine. Also, they're completely adjustable, so lining up your pulleys is not going to be a problem. For the power steering pump, we also got that from Zoops, and it's this little tiny thing. It mounts down on the driver's side, low on the engine. Of course, we got a polished pulley to go with that. Now, you might be wondering, how come this thing is so small? Well, if you'll notice, it doesn't have a reservoir on it. That's because you use this remote reservoir and mounting bracket, and you can put this on the firewall or on the inner fender, any place that you've got some room. And that's really nice when you have a tight engine bay. Now, to put this thing on, it just goes on the bracket that we put on earlier. For the starter and the alternator, well, we needed something that would match the look and the performance of what we're building here. So we went to Tough Stuff Performance, got one of their cool charger, polished aluminum alternators. Now this thing kicks out 140 amps of raw current, has a one-wire hookup, and an internal cooling fan. If you use a lot of power accessories, this is a must. Of course, you know where we got the pulleys, and now you can see how this is all starting to work together. There's your adjustment for your belt tension. For those of you that have ever run headers on a Chevrolet, you've probably experienced their unique ability to cook a starter. That's because the original starter is really big, sits right in this area here, and the headers run right down alongside of it. You might as well just stick the starter in the oven and bake it, because that's what the headers do. Well, Tough Stuff has solved that with these high torque starters that have a super strong electric motor, gear reduction, and a little tiny body that keeps the starter away from the headers. These will eliminate your starter problems forever. The last accessory is the air conditioning compressor. We got this from Vintage Air, and this is a fully polished unit, and it just happens to go with a complete air conditioning unit for the 67 through 72 Chevy truck. Now don't get impatient, we'll tell you all about it later on. Of course, like everything else, it just bolts onto the brackets, and that takes care of your pulley system. Pretty awesome, huh? Now, just a minute, I got something I want to show you. One of the cool things about this particular bracket system is everything is mounted off to the side, so you can still look down on top of the engine, you can get the valve covers off, nothing's cluttered up. But you can only do this if you've got plenty of room in your engine bay. Now here's how our inner fenders are going to mount. Notice how everything tucks down into this dead area here. Like I said before, man, it's all about the details. All right, moving on, it is time for the drive shaft. Now remember, I've got some serious power kicking out of that engine. Heck, I might even put some nitrous on it. So I need a drive shaft that'll handle that. And for that, 3 words: Denny's Driveshaft Service. Now this is what they call their nitrous ready shaft, and if you've done your measurements right, it should just slide right in and bolt up. Now these shafts are completely balanced, fully painted, and they're built out of a special tubing that just happens to be Denny's trade secret. But what's not a secret is his incredible warranty. If you happen to break one of these welds or twist this tube, he'll replace it for free. Matter of fact, these are so strong, I got 2 of them for the Crazy Horse Bronco. Welcome back to Trucks. We are right in the process of finishing up the chassis of Project Copperhead. We've already got the pulleys and the belts and the brackets on the front, got the drive shaft in. Now it is time to deal with the exhaust system. Now the reality of one of these kind of projects is you are not going to find a system that's just going to bolt right in. This gives you the opportunity to hunt the aftermarket, find all the cool products that you want to use, and then once you got all the products set aside, you need to hunt down a place to bend you up some pipes. Now for that, we went to Mike's Muffler Shop in Lebanon, Tennessee. They specialize in custom exhaust, and they custom built us a dual exhaust system exactly the way I wanted it. The first part we're going to put on is the head pipe, and it bolts right to the header. But check this out. It's got a flex coupling. Now what this does is allows the engine to flex and move, and not the pipes. These are going to be solidly mounted. You got to use this if you're going to solidly mount your pipes. Now notice Mike also built in a Y here. That's going to split our exhaust, and it's also going to allow me to bolt on one of the coolest things we're going to put on this truck. Check it out. This is an electric exhaust cutout, and we got it from Doug's Headers. Now it uses an electric motor to slide a stainless steel door inside the pipe and close it off. Now, if you're not familiar with the way that these things work, well, I'll explain it to you a little bit later. You're going to love this. Now, keep in mind, you have got a lot of mass out here. You got a little shaft that sticks out when this thing's open. So make sure you're leaving enough room around your transmission, your cross member, wherever you're mounting this thing. Next, we'll slide in the pipe that goes through the cross member. Now, to hold it in place, we got these really slick aluminum clamps from the guys at Early Classic Enterprises. Now, these aren't in their catalog, but if you call them up and ask real nice, I bet they'll make some for you. To mount them, just drill your holes and bolt them on. Now we're ready for the mufflers, and these 304 series mufflers from Edelbrock are just the ticket. These things are made out of polished 304 stainless steel, so they're always going to look good. They flow like crazy, and they're going to just thunder back behind that 572. After the muffler, we'll put on the tailpipes that are held in place with these clamps. They also go through a cross member, down around the gas tank, and tuck up against the frame for a nice, clean, stealthy look. You'll never see this system, but you're sure going to hear it. The last pipe we're going to put on are these dump pipes. They slide right under the frame and into the exhaust cutout. And this whole system is going to be held in place with these stainless steel clamps. Now, I know you're wondering just how this system is going to work. So here's a scenario for you. I'm sitting at the stoplight, minding my own business. Some hotshot pulls up and wants to run me. So I flip the switch, open up the exhaust cutout. That bypasses my main exhaust, and now I'm running straight pipe right out of the 572, out the side, into the side of his head. And this is the last thing he's going to hear before I uncork this thing and give him a really good look at my tail end. Then, after I'm done, so I don't add to my ticket collection, reach over, flip the switch, close up the exhaust, and Copperhead slinks off into the night, waiting for the next victim. Man, is this stuff fun or what? All right, done. Now, one thing that you do want to do with a system like this is protect it. So, we're going to take the pipes down to a place called Color Coated and have them put a high temperature coating on these pipes. Shoot, then they'll last forever. Now, we're going to lay out a fuel system because we got to feed that thing. But not now, after the break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Question: how do you feed a very thirsty big block engine that's kicking out about 650 horses? Well, you got to have a high performance fuel system, that's for sure. So we went to Mallory and here's what we got. First, the fuel filter. Now this is a comp filter series 140. It features a replaceable filter element, dual inlets, dual outlets, and this thing will handle flows up to 200 gallons an hour. That's getting it. For the fuel pump, we also got their Series 140 pump. Has a nice quiet electric motor, and this thing will kick out enough volume to feed that big old engine. The problem is, these are factory set at 12 psi. That's too much for a carburetor. You'll blow out your seats and stuff. So, we are going to use this fuel pressure regulator. That way we can set our fuel pressure at 7 psi, which is what you need for a carburetor. Now, one problem that you always run into anytime you're putting on an aftermarket fuel system, and that is, where are you going to put it? Most parts come with their own mounting bracket, but the problem is most frames are an open C channel, so how are you going to mount them? You can't turn them on their side, and you don't want to mount them to the outside of the frame. Matter of fact, the perfect spot would be right here, but what are you going to do? Well, you need to custom make your own mounting point. That's a little involved. Take some special tools. I'm going to show you how to do it. First, take a piece of cardboard, set it up against the frame in the desired area, then tap down the frame edges with a hammer to get the desired pattern. Now, cut out the pattern and make sure that it's going to fit. Now, I know you're wondering about these curves here. Those are for looks, see? It's all about the details. Now I'll transfer the pattern to 3/16 steel. And cut it out using a plasma cutter or a torch. take your part and mark your mounting holes. Then drill and tap your holes. Fire up the welder and weld them in. Grind down your weld. Finally, paint it to match. See, it looks like the frame came from the factory this way. Now, like I said before, this is pretty involved, but it is the best way to deal with these open C-channel frames permanently. Now, just bolt on the filter, make sure it goes between the tank and the pump, because this is what keeps any trash from getting in the pump and locking it up. Now, the pump, obviously you're going to have to do the same thing for it that you had to do for the filter, but check this out. Look how nice and clean this thing's going to fit around this exhaust system. Okay, to tie this all together, we're going to use some of this braided stainless steel hose that we got from Russell Performance, because it not only looks really good, it's also really strong. Now, the size we're using is -10 AN, which is just about the same size as your garden hose. Now, to connect it all, we're going to use some of their anodized fittings. Now, the regulator. Well, we're going to have to wait on that because we're going to mount it on the firewall, and obviously we don't have a firewall yet. But remember, with a regulator, that doesn't do you any good unless you have a gauge to go with it. So for that, we went to Autometer and got their fuel pressure gauge. Now, we got one more thing to do here. You're going to love it, but after the break. Welcome back to Trucks. We're finishing up some of the details on the chassis of Project Copperhead. Now, there's one more thing that I want to do today before we're done. That is rig up some sort of air cleaner. Now, there's a lot of really nice air cleaners out there. Chrome, polished aluminum, things like that. But I wanted something really unique and different for Copperhead. Check this out. I saw the prototype for this over a year ago, and now they are finally available to the public. Now, Johnson's Rod Shop is where you get them, and they look just like the old scoops that were on the top fuel dragsters back in the 60s. Now, they've got a top fiberglass shell. Then, of course, you have the lower plate and the filter and a whole bunch of options on how to mount this. So this is not just a simple bolt-on. It's up to you to make it fit and look the way you want. Here's how you do it. If you look closely, the upper shell's got these faint little marks so you can cut out a couple of openings here in the front, but that's not all. The kit also comes with these cool little grills that are pre-formed to fit right into those openings. Very slick. We're using a Dremel tool to carefully cut out the openings. Go slow, because if you cut out too much, you're going to have a big problem. Once your cuts are made, take some sandpaper, smooth down the edges so everything's nice and smooth and flowing together. Now, don't forget to keep checking the fit of your grills so everything will be perfect. Oh, that's going to be cool. Now it's time to determine just how high you want this thing to sit. Now, Johnson's Rod Shop designs these with a tall base on them, but unfortunately that will put it through the hood of most trucks. So, if that's not the look you're after, you'll need to come in and measure, see how much of the base you're going to cut off. About 1 1/8 will do it. Then just cut off the base and finally reassemble it all. Yeah, there, that should show you that the little extra time and work to make this thing fit right is definitely worth it. Man, that is sweet. Now, we've gone ahead and painted it orange to match the engine, but imagine graphics or pinstriping or flames or something on here. Like I keep telling you, if you want something special and unique, man, it's all about the details. For the first truck gear, I'm going to take you back to a kit that we gave you just a little glimpse of earlier. It's a complete air conditioning unit for a 67 through 72 Chevy truck, and you can get it from Vintage Air. Now, the good news is this is a complete kit, not just a bunch of parts to kind of help you put together a kit. Now, you've already seen me put on the polished compressor. The kit also comes with a wiring harness and relays, glove box, condenser and evaporator, soft lines, hard lines, a firewall cover, and of course an underdash heat and air unit. Already has the fan, the wiring, all the vents. Guys, this is what Chevy should have put in them from the factory. Now, if you're working on a vintage truck and you want to keep it cool, well, Vintage Air can help you out. One of the biggest hassles of working on an older truck is finding the little stuff. Like, what do you do when you need bezels and knobs and handles and things like that? Well, if the truck's an old Chevy, you call Early Classic Enterprises because they've got all the knobs, the bezels, the control units, the vents for the heat and the air conditioning, everything to make your truck as good as new. Just think. No more hunting around in the junkyards for old, nasty, cruddy parts. All you do is call Early Classic Enterprises and wait for UPS. Now, for those of you that don't know, this is a late 60s Chevy truck that started out live here in the shop as a bare frame and a cab. Now, the reason is to show you what's available for these old trucks and some of the choices you have when you're putting one together. Now, today I'm going to jump into the interior, show you how to lay one of those out, but before we do that, I'm going to bring you up to date on some of the stuff you haven't seen. The chassis is pretty much finished. We covered that on the show. You got the Dana 60 rear end, the custom dual exhaust system, the gear vendor's overdrive, the electric exhaust cutouts, the B&M Turbo 400, and of course the 572 crate motor. But what you haven't seen is that I painted the engine, transmission, and valve covers a special copper color. More on that later on. But before I painted the valve covers, I sent them down to the guys at Advanced Plating and had them not only chromed, but also had them engraved with 572, Copperhead, and since this is the first production 572 engine, 001. Yeah, this is special. Okay, paint. Yeah, paint. Now, I knew Copperhead needed a special color. So, got together with Ron Payton at the PPG Custom Shop, and we started looking and painting and mixing and looking some more. Found a lot of killer colors, but not the right one until I saw that 2002 Ford Ranger color. And I said, Ron, this is the color. This is the right pigment. It's just a little flat. It needs something to bring the depth out in it. So we went into the mixing room, added a much bigger, more aggressive flake, and bam, just brought the color to life. Notice that the bigger flake brings out the gold overtones, adds a ton more depth. It's hard to believe this is the same color with just a different flake in it. Now, this color is available from PPG now. It's one of their new custom colors. It's called Copperhead Metallic, and you need to get it from Auto Body Color and Supply in Nashville, Tennessee, because they have the mixing code. The paint and body work on this thing was done by Kevin Tates, who does the Paintucation video series. And as you can see, he just rocked on this thing. Now, we kept the body modifications to a minimum, shaved the drip rails, filled a few holes, and heck, that's it. These old cabs don't need a lot. They were pretty right from the factory. Then Kevin worked this thing down to perfection, shot on the flawless paint. Let me tell you, it is right. Incidentally, he's got a new video out in his series. You may want to check it out. It's called Body Shop Basics, and it's perfect for the do-it-yourselfer. You can get it on his website, paintucation.com. Check it out. It's good stuff. All right, now that we're all up to date, it is time to get to work. Now, anytime that you lay out a custom interior, doesn't matter if you're working on a Ford, Chevy, Dodge, import, new, old, it doesn't matter. If you don't do things in the right order, you're going to have a big mess on your hands. Now, most people think, well, first thing you put in is the carpet, right? Only if you're doing something original. If you're doing something custom, it's a lot easier to do your mounting and fabricating with the carpet out. So let's go look at some seats. This is the C5 Corvette-style seat from Steel Horse Automotive, but these are made specifically for trucks. So they've got a thicker base on them, they're a little beefier, and they come with great upholstery. However, the first thing I did was ship them off to Catskin and have them reupholster them with black leather here in the center. Then around the sides is a tan naugahyde that's got just a little bit of a metal flake in it, which is going to be perfect with that paint. Now, of course, Catskin is known for their custom logos, so we had them stitch this Copperhead logo in there because just like the valve covers, man, it's all about the details. All right, mounting a set of seats in an area where they were never supposed to go is a challenge that you're going to run into, whether you're putting in new seats like this or something out of a salvage yard. Now, you're after three things here. Number one is seat height. You want to make sure that the seat is sitting high enough so you're looking through the center of the windshield, not through the bottom, not through the top, right through the center. And this isn't bad. It can actually go up about an inch though. Number 2 is the angle of the seat. Now you want the bottom of the seat to angle back just a little bit so it supports the bottom of your legs. Around 7 to 10 degrees is usually about right. Finally, make sure the seat is centered up with the steering column. Now a paper plate stapled to a broom handle makes a surprisingly accurate mock-up. Once all your measuring is done, it's time to fabricate your seat pedestals. Now I'm making these out of old seat brackets that I had laying around. When they're all together, bolt the pedestals to the seats. Mark and drill your holes in the floor pan, and then bolt the seats in the truck. Now if you took your time with the measurements, they should be perfect. Next up is the shifter, and for that we're using the B&M Light Truck Mega Shifter because it's not only a high-performance ratcheting shifter, but it also comes with a little taller base because, like I said before, most truck seats sit a little higher than cars, and you want this shifter up where you can get your hands on it. Once your location's decided, it's just a matter of trimming the base to match the contours of the floor. Then just drill your holes and bolt on your shifter. Now this particular B&M is really nice because it's got a lot of adjustments, so it's perfect for a custom application. Then just put on your shroud, and that takes care of your shifter. All right, once you've decided the location of your seats and your shifter and a console if you're going to use one, anything that goes on the floor, well, sit back, man, take a break, and enjoy your handiwork because, yeah, you guessed it, everything's got to come back out because now it's time for your carpet, and we're going to take care of that after the break. Man, it's looking great in here. There you are. Yeah, I knew you'd be back because the truck on the chopping block today is Copperhead, and we're showing you how to lay out a custom interior. Now the cab floor's all clean, bolt holes are all drilled for the seats and stuff like that. Time for carpet. Now for that we went to Early Classic Enterprises, got this one-piece form-fitting carpet that's going to fit our floors like a glove. Now, most aftermarket carpet comes with this jute padding like this, and that's really nice, but that's not quite enough, especially when that big 572 starts bellowing. So we're going to soundproof the cab a little bit. This kit is from Quiet Ride Solutions, and they call this stuff Acoustic Shield. Now, it's a thick sound deadening pad that goes on the floor, in the doors, on the firewall, the back of the cab, any place where noise and heat can get into the vehicle. Now, you also get these damper pads that go right on the sheet metal, and they keep vibration from coming through the sheet metal. And then, of course, we got these form-fitting covers for the firewall. Now, the best part about this Quiet Ride kit is it's made for specific applications. So, this will literally just slide into place. The first thing you need to do is make sure the floor is clean and dry, then lay out the damper pads according to the diagram. Use a wallpaper roller to make sure that the adhesive gets a good bond to the metal. Now you're ready for the Acoustic Shield pads. First, give them a good thick coat of the supplied glue. Then, lightly set it into place and position it. Now, you'll notice that I'm not gluing this front part yet. That's because I need to be able to get to these body bolts when I bolt this body down on the frame. Make sure that you're planning ahead on your project, because if not, you might work yourself into a corner. Now, all you have to do to make this permanent, once you have it how you like it, is just use some firm pressure on it, smoothing it as you go. Once the panels are in place, the final step is to seal all the seams and edges with the aluminum tape. Then, just set the carpet in place. Now, once this cab is bolted down on the frame, we'll go ahead and glue this in. Then we'll hold it in place on the sides with these new seal plates that we got from Early Classic Enterprises. Now notice, our carpet only comes back so far. Now, that doesn't mean we got a bad piece of carpet. It means that this truck used to have a gas tank back here and a bench seat. If you take your gas tank out, you're going to need to make a trip down to the upholstery shop, get a strip of carpet about this wide, and glue it in there. Next up is the dash and the gauges. Now, even though the original gauge cluster was cool and it's still available, we want to move beyond that a little bit. And No Limit Engineering had exactly what I was looking for. Now, this is their gauge panel for the 67, 72 GM trucks, and it's a nice thick piece of ball milled, polished aluminum. This thing is awesome. Now, notice that the wipers and the lights have been relocated down here to the corners. The turn signal indicators have been moved out here to the sides. And then to keep the look of the big gauges, these big holes here are stuffed with huge odometer, speedometer, and tach. And then the smaller holes are for the smaller odometer gauges, so you've got complete instrumentation. So you've got performance gauges in a really nice package. But wait, there's more. No Limit Engineering also has a matching glove box door with cup holders to round out your dash. To install the panel, you do need to cut the dash just a little bit. These little corner pieces have got to go. So go ahead and mark your cut lines with some masking tape. Cut it out. Then just mount the gauges into the panel, slide the whole assembly into the dash. Now you'll be glad to know that the glove box doesn't require any modifications. It just bolts right on. Clean, simple, and man, that looks good. For a dash pad, the guys at Early Classic were waiting for my call because they knew what I wanted, and this is it. A genuine GM dash that looks and fits exactly like what came in this truck. Yeah. Now, we've done a lot today. Got a lot more to do. More Copperhead after this. Welcome back to Trucks and Project Copperhead, where today's subject is interiors. Now, I'm showing you how to lay one out on this classic Chevy, and we've already dealt with soundproofing and carpet, seat placement, and layout of the dash. Now we're going to move on to an area that most people are a little afraid of, and that is interior panels. Things like door panels, kick panels, that kind of stuff. Now, on most vehicles, you got a couple choices. You can buy an original style replacement panel, or you can do a custom panel, and that, of course, is what we're going to do. Now, I showed you how to make custom panels before on the Wicked Willie's project. First, you need to make your panel out of some backing material to however you want it to fit the surface. Now, this is a creative process, so it is time-consuming. Then, when you have the panel made, you have to upholster it. And this is why most people run from interior work like the plague. This kit will make that whole process a heck of a lot easier. Now, this is from a company named Rod Doors, and they specialize in plastic panels for your interior. Now, the kit that I'm using is called the Dano, made specifically for the 67 through 72 Chevy trucks. Now, you've got door panels, they've got armrests. This utilizes your stock door puller, and you've got room out here for your stock window roller, or you can mount buttons for power windows. You've got A-pillar covers that have little tweeters in them. You have kick panels, a headliner panel, and you even get this huge piece that goes back behind the seats, covers the area where the gas tank used to be. Yeah, this is a complete kit. Now, the best part about using Rod Doors is that now all you have to do is glue on your upholstery. So all you bring to this equation is some adhesive, some tools, and your actual material. And you can go from this to this in just a few hours. Then, once the panel is done, it just pops in place using supplied Velcro. Look at this. Covers the whole door. That way you don't have to come in and do any repair work on something like these speaker holes. And if you don't think using a Rod Doors kit is going to save you some time, you just try to do this the old way. Get all those contours right. When you go to set a body down on a chassis, of course the ideal situation is to have a lift like this and go jacks under the chassis so you can roll everything around and line it up perfectly. However, very few people are going to have these tools, so the next best thing is to get about 4 of your buddies and a couple of pizzas and have them help you set the cab in place. Once the cab is sitting on the rubber mounts, 4 bolts is all it takes to mount it down. With the cab bolted down on the frame, man, you can see how this is starting to lay out in here. Now, it is tight. You got about 1 inch of clearance here at the back of the valve cover, and about a ½ inch here at the back of the air cleaner, but that's enough. All right, this thing's finally starting to look like a truck again. We're going to go ahead and turn our attention to the bed. One of the great things about the 67 through 72 GM truck is that almost every piece for the bed is available brand new, which means you don't have to go out and try to resurrect an old rusty bed, unless of course you just want to. Now we got this whole kit, every piece from Early Classic Enterprises. Here's what we got. 2 new bed sides, tell you a little bit more about those in a minute. A new head gate, a new smooth tailgate. Now we got the smooth one as opposed to the one that says Chevrolet in it, because if you don't know this is a Chevy by now, guys, we can't help you. Now we got 2 new wheel tubs, a bunch of support braces for the bed, and most importantly, a big bag of stainless hardware so we don't have to mess around with old rusty bolts. As you can see, this kit from Early Classic is really nice, but the 2 most unique pieces are these bed sides. Now these are made by Goodmark Industries, and when these things hit the market a few years ago, people went crazy. Because until that time, man, finding 2 good bed sides was almost impossible. Remember, these are trucks. People used them to haul things with. Now these pieces fit just like the originals, but notice, our marker lights have been shaved, stake pocket holes have been filled. Goodmark does not make these like that. They make them original. So if you want it smoothed down, you need to do it yourself. But I've showed you how to smooth panels in the past, so you know how to do it. To put the bed together, it's best to assemble it off the frame. Now this is an area where you're going to need an extra set of hands because you can't do this by yourself. Now I've got my good buddy Dave Clark to give me a hand. We'll start with one bed side and bolt on the rear cross member. Next is the front head gate. Now make sure, if you're using stainless hardware like we are, that you use some anti-seize on the threads so you don't gall them. We got ours with the kit. Next comes the other bed side. Keep in mind our bolts are just finger tight at this point so we can square this thing up later. Also, don't be surprised if you have to file and fit a little to get things just right. And be prepared to touch up your paint. Yeah, it's all part of the reassembly process. Now that we have a basic structure done, it's time to put it up on jack stands so we don't damage the bottom edges of the bed sides. Then we'll just bolt in the wheel tubs. All right, now it is time to square up this bed. And you need to take your time here, because this is what's going to determine just how square and true this bed's going to sit and how nice these tailgate gaps are going to be. And nothing looks worse than a crooked or cockeyed bed. Now once you have it exactly how you want it, go ahead and tighten down your bolts. All right. Now we're ready for the wood. And the kit that I got for that also came from Early Classic. Here's what it consists of. Nice premium quality oak planks, all pre-cut, ready to fit your bed. And then to go between those planks, got these polished aluminum strips. Now notice, you don't see any mounting bolts here. This is one of their hidden mounting bolt kits, and I'll tell you more about this when we go to put these in. Now it's important to remember that your bed kit does not come out of the UPS truck ready to just drop into your truck. No man, you gotta pre-fit it, which means you gotta set it in place, drill your holes, make it fit your bed, because each bed is different. Then you need to sand it, stain it, and seal it like we showed you how to do a few weeks ago. Then you can set it aside. So when you come to this final assembly step, everything should just slide into place. No scratched paint, no marred wood. Everybody's happy. To install the wood, we'll start with these smaller side pieces around the wheel tubs. Then bolt in the remaining cross members. This is where you'll be really glad you pre-fit everything. Then just slide in your planks and your aluminum strips. Make sure that you leave out the plank that's going to cover these mounting bolts, or you won't be able to bolt your bed in. All right, Dave and I are going to take a break, get something to eat. It's your turn to buy.
Again?
Yeah. Now that we're putting all these parts into the bed of Copperhead, you can see just how nice this bed's going to be. Now all we have to do is bolt it down onto the frame, tighten everything up, and Copperhead is 2/3 finished. We'll be back after this. All right, go ahead and start lowering this down. Hey, we're back. For those of you that are just getting here, we are reconstructing the body on Project Copperhead, a 67 Chevy short bed pickup. Now, speaking of bed, we have spent the first part of the show reconstructing this bed. Now it's just a matter of setting it in place. That's looking good, and bolting it on. Now, if you don't have lifting equipment like this, you're gonna need at least 4 buddies to come in here and help you set this down on here. That's it, so you don't scratch the paint. Buddy, we are on. Before you tighten the bed bolts, make sure that you recheck the squareness of your bed, because picking it up and moving it around can cause it to move a little. Once it's right, tighten them down. Now we're ready to tighten the bed strip bolts, but before we do, I want to tell you a little bit about these strips because they're pretty unique. Now, running down the back side is a slot that goes all the way down, and into that slot slides this very unique bolt that has that special shoulder on it. Now what this does, slides into the slot and gives you adjustment for your cross members, and then that shoulder gives you the grip that allows you to pull this thing down tight into the wood. Now what this does is eliminate any bolt heads for a super clean look. Okay, I've got the gas tank out, doing some measurements, and there's something I want to bring to your attention here. If you are relocating your gas tank to under the bed of the truck, and this is not just for this style of truck, this is for any kind of truck, you need to figure out some way to get the gas down into the tank. And unfortunately, you can't really lay that out until the whole bed is put together. You see how it's all going to fit. Now, you can take this as far as your imagination will let you. You can come in, put a filler cap coming out here, put a remote door there, hide it under a marker light. You can bring it out through the tail light, have the tail light pivot down like a 56 Chevy. Or the aftermarket is full of billet flip doors that recess into the wood, or kits that let the wood flip up. Man, you've got a lot of options here. But that's another project for another day, because we still have a lot of body parts to put on. Just don't forget, you need to do that. The last big piece to go on the bed is the tailgate. Once again, this is a two-man job because it needs to be finessed into place so you don't scratch that paint all up. Once the gate's in place, put on the hardware and latches and you are done. Now we're ready to look at some taillights. We got these brand new reproduction taillights and backup lights from Early Classic Enterprises. Now these are great. These will slide right into the stock openings, but they utilize this old style technology, a single dual filament bulb. These were notorious for being too dim. Now that was great for 1967, but there's been a lot of changes in lighting since then. So to go with this, we got this LED panel kit from Early Classic. Now this utilizes 160 LED bulbs, which is far brighter than this, uses less power than this, and it won't burn out like this. And the best part is, slides right into the original socket, lays down on the housing, on goes the lens, and you are ready for your truck. And that is all there is to it. An original look, modern lighting. Now, while I'm back here, what about this big empty area right here? Well, as usual, you've got a couple choices. You can put on a rear roll pan. Now what this will do is blend into these lower bed sides and roll metal down underneath, giving you a really smooth, clean look. They're cool, but they've got a couple drawbacks. Number one, you're going to want to weld it in, which means you're going to have to do some metal work and some paint work. Number two, you can say goodbye to that hitch. And number three, you're not going to have any kind of protection back here from any kind of fender bender. Or your other choice would be to use an original style bumper, which is what I'm going to do. And the reason is, not only can I keep the hitch and keep some protection back here, but also these trucks were built in an era where the bumper was actually designed to be part of the styling of the rig. So they look really cool. So yeah, we're going to keep it. The bumper bolts on easy using factory braces. And that is it. Now notice, the hitch is hidden behind the bumper and the license plate, but when you need it, there it is. Now step back, take a look at this. Is this sweet or what? Now this takes care of the assembly of the bed, but don't go away. We got a lot more to do after this. Welcome back to the shop. If you're just getting here, oh man, you have missed some good stuff because we're putting Copperhead back together and it's going quick. They always do at this point. Now, it doesn't matter if you're working on a 67 through 72 Chevy like this or whatever. The assembly steps are going to be pretty much the same no matter what you're working on. So for you latecomers, we're going to walk you through the steps of what we've done so far. Starting with the finished chassis, we bolted the cab on. Then we completely constructed a bed using new sheet metal, wood floor with smooth strips so you don't see any bolt heads, an original style bumper, new taillights, everything. And as you can see, this is turning into an awesome truck. Now, one of the most amazing things though is the only original piece of GM sheet metal I've used so far is this cab. Everything else is reproduction parts. That gives you a pretty good idea of the quality of aftermarket parts out there. That's also one of the main reasons for this buildup, to show you what's out there, hopefully get you excited about a buildup of your own. Now, the cab's bolted down, the back half of the truck is assembled. It's time to do something about this steering system. Now, obviously, we need a steering column, and you got a couple of choices here. You can try to hunt down an original column. You can still find them, but then you're going to have to paint it, you're going to have to detail it, and once you're all done with that, you still have an original column. Now that's fine, but you do have another choice. This is from I Did It. This is their chrome tilt column, and it is made specifically for this model of truck. So it's going to slide right into place and bolt right up. And it will make a huge difference in the look of your interior. And you got your turn signals, tilt, hazard lights, and everything is wired up to plug into your wiring harness. This is nice. Now, to connect that column to the steering box, got a stainless steel shaft and a couple of Borgeson U-joints. Now, this big boy here is to absorb vibration so you don't get vibration up into your steering wheel. Now, speaking of steering wheel, this is Colorado Custom's Lazier wheel. Now, check this out. Colorado Custom offers steering wheels to match their custom wheels. That is a nice touch. And the leather on the wheel matches the upholstery inside, and the wheel itself has got this polished aluminum adapter that's going to mate right up with that steering column, and it's going to look perfect. And that's the idea here. Build your truck to where everything matches and works together, and you can do that no matter what budget you're on. To install the column, just slide it into place, bolt it up with the factory hardware. With the column loosely in place, we'll just slide on the steering wheel, and then we'll position the column in the cab where we want it. Now you need to take your time here because this is where you make it fit how you want it to fit. Now notice you've got 2 or 3 inches here that you can move this thing forward and back. Also, when you're setting up a steering system, ideally you want it to be at driving position and the steering column to be straight, pointing right at you. That way you've got full benefit of your tilt option. Now once you have it how you want it, go ahead and bolt it up underneath the dash, connect your steering shaft up at the box, and that is it. Hey, welcome to the shop. I have got a great show planned for you today because I am buried up to my elbows putting Project Copperhead back together. Now, like I've said before, this is where it starts to get exciting. This is where you actually see what the truck is going to be. This is also where you need to be careful that you are taking your time because it's really easy to forget things and forget steps. And the last thing you want is parts falling off your truck the first time you take it down the road. Now last week, bolted the cab on, put the bed together, and I've been slowly working my way forward, which means it's time to do something about the doors. Now these doors, just like the cab, are actually genuine original GM parts. So I was really lucky to find these. But if you don't have a good set of doors, reproductions are available and they're nice. But they're not going to fit like an original piece. You're going to have to massage them a little bit. Now this does not mean that they're bad parts. This is just the reality of it. So picking up a nice clean set of originals is really nice if you can find them. Now these doors have been modified with a kit from Early Classic Enterprises for one-piece power windows. Now you can see this combination works extremely well and really cleans up the look of the door. If you're going to do this kind of conversion, you're going to have to modify the upper hinge so it'll clear the window channel. With the doors assembled and the hinges bolted on, you're ready to bolt your doors on. But wait just a minute. If you've just painted your rig, you need to chase the threads with a tap, make sure everything's clean so it bolts on nice and easy. Now you're ready to put your door on. Now this is usually a very awkward two-man job, but I'm using this little tool called the door dolly from Brute Manufacturing, and it allows you to position the door exactly where you want it. Now check this out. This controls the inward and outward tilt of the door. These down here make sure that everything's level, and then this jack just lowers it right to where you want it, so you can literally just bolt it right in place. Now this is a tool you won't use very often, but man, when you need it, it is a lifesaver. Make sure you take the time to fit the door properly, because nothing looks worse than misaligned body panels. Once your doors are in place and all your gaps are perfect, it's time to mount the striker inside the cab. Now here's how to do that. You've got a threaded backing plate that goes in the back. Then the striker itself goes on the outside here. Now, what about all these shims? Well, these shims go between the body and the striker plate. Now, this allows you to adjust the striker so that door fits and latches perfect. Now, one other thing, whenever you're fitting a door, make sure you leave the window down, because that'll keep you from accidentally locking yourself out and having to crawl through a window. Start with no shims and add them as you need them. Looks like we're going to need about 3 here. Also, remember, the striker plate can be adjusted in and out and up and down. Now this is what decides just how deep that door fits into the cab. So be prepared to spend a little time here fitting, checking, tweaking until it's perfect. And you can get it perfect even without weather stripping in there. Man, that looks nice, especially with that shaved rip rail. Now, once the doors are done, it's time to move to the front of the truck. Now up here, I've got 2 new inner fenders and a radiator support, all of which came from Early Classic, and they're all reproduction parts. But you're going to have a hard time telling this from an original. It's got all the stampings, all the fittings, even the captive nuts that the originals had. So this is just a direct bolt-in replacement. To install the radiator support, set on the new rubber mounts, then bolt it to the frame using the new hardware. Now, the reason that this went on first is that from here on out, everything, the inner fenders, the hood, the grill, all either mount to the radiator support, the firewall, or somewhere in between. So we've left our bolts loose, so we have some adjustment when we go to put it all on. Now, we're going to take a short break, but we're going to be right back on this project. So don't start messing with the remote, or you're going to miss it. Hey, welcome back to Trucks. We are concentrating on assembling the front sheet metal on this little 67 half-ton Chevy. Now, we're working on the inner fenders right now, and they bolt to the radiator support here in the front, and then to the bottom of the firewall there in the rear. And as usual, I'm leaving the bolts a little loose for now, so I'll be able to adjust this thing, move it around once I get it all together. Now you can see how those inner fenders tie everything together. Now, they're not just for protection to keep mud and rocks and junk out of your engine compartment. They also supply a mounting point for your outer fender. Now, a lot of people don't think to paint these inner fenders. They just leave them black, and that's fine. But man, if you want your engine compartment to really pop, paint your inner fenders and your firewall and your radiator support. You'll be glad you did. All right, fenders are up next. And of course, you've got some choices here. Originals, reproductions, or NOS, like these are. Now, NOS in this case does not stand for NOS or nitrous. It stands for new old stock, which means these are brand new GM parts that have never been on a truck before. Now you're wondering, oh man, how does that work? Well, it's very simple. When a manufacturer makes a vehicle, they also make replacement parts for it. When they stop making that vehicle, a few years later, they stop making parts for it. And all the leftover parts down at the dealership become NOS. They're new, but they're old stock. And these are, without a doubt, the best replacement parts you can buy. However, be prepared to pay top dollar for these, and availability is an issue, because once they're gone, they're gone. To install the fenders, just slide them into place, starting at the rear, back toward the door. Now notice, I've got tape on this rear edge and up here on the front. That's so I don't accidentally scratch my paint. Remember, when you're fitting a body panel, you're moving it around, adjusting it. Having tape on is cheap insurance. With the fender in place and loosely bolted up, it's time to set your gaps in your alignment. Now, you'll need to keep checking these as you add more parts like the hood and the grille, but the more time you spend now getting this right, the less you'll have to do on the final adjustment once you have it all together. Yeah. Next up, the grille. Probably the most unique feature of the 67, 68 Chevy truck is the grille. It's so clean, so well designed. Now, you sharp-eyed Chevy guys might notice that little bow tie emblem's gone. We got rid of that to smooth that grille down even more. Now, if you're looking for a grille like this, I can't help you. Nobody is reproducing these yet. An original one like this is like gold. So keep that in mind if you're thinking of converting your 69 through 72 to this earlier style grille. Now, the good news is everything else is available from Early Classic. So the first thing we're going to do is rivet in these inserts. Follow that with the new marker lights, and then the new trim strips. And then just install it. And that takes care of most of our front end sheet metal. Now step back, take a look at this thing. Is that sweet or what? Hey, welcome to Trucks. Today's show is one that a lot of people, including myself, have been waiting for a long time, because it's time to roll Copperhead back into the spotlight. Now, obviously, I've got a few things to do to this truck still before I can call it done, and I've got some surprises for you on this project still. But before we do that, I've been getting a lot of requests from people to take you back through the project and show you what I've done so far, because there's a lot of people building classic trucks. So, here we go, back to the beginning, and the whole purpose for doing this project. First of all, it's going to be a hot street truck. Second of all, it's going to deal with one of the most popular body styles of truck ever built, the 67 through 72 Chevrolet. If you start with just the cab and the frame, you can build this truck, and most of it is just bolt-on stuff. Now, I know a lot of you are probably saying, oh, now wait a minute, no, the whole truck? You gotta prove that to me. Well, I thought you'd probably say that. So, the only way to prove it to you is to build one. What I'm starting with is literally a 67 cab, a frame, and of course a title. You gotta have a title. You don't have a truck without that. With the frame stripped and powder coated, and the cab cleaned up and wearing a fresh coat of primer, well, we had a solid foundation, so it was time to start building. Now, the first thing that you need to decide about any project is what direction you're going to go. Now, this project is going to be nice and low and smooth, but it's not going to detract from the original classic lines of the truck. It's going to pretty much be the ultimate cruiser. The first stop was to install new upper and lower control arms, ball joints, bushings, so everything will be firm and tight. Now, for the lower ball joints, those need to be pressed in, so do not try to do this with a hammer. You'll need to take it down. A good machine shop just charge you a few bucks to have that done, to give us a nice starting point for our alignment. Now, the bottom control arm, it's just held in place with these U-bolts that come with the kit. We followed that up with new drop spindles and springs to not only give us better handling, but also get the nose down where it belongs. To round out the handling package, we also tossed in a quick ratio steering box and bolted up a huge performance sway bar underneath. Now, don't think for a second we forgot about the rear suspension. No, it needed some help too. So, new bushings and trailing arms were mated together, and then the trailing arms were installed with new springs to make this thing sit down and have the right stance. So far, things seemed pretty normal, but I did drop a hint of what I had in mind for this truck when I installed the huge Dana 60 rear end and track bar. People begin to wonder. Next, it was time to get the fuel tank out of the cab. Not the most desirable situation. And relocate it under the bed. And this custom tank from Early Classic fits so nice It makes you wonder why GM didn't do something like this at the factory. Now, to get the truck to stop like it should, front disc brakes were added. And then, to make the chassis a roller, we slid on a hot wheel and tire combination to finish it all up. Now, with the chassis done, it was time for the drivetrain. Oh, I had a lot of fun teasing you with this one, telling you how cool it was going to be. But I don't think anybody, including Chevy, was really prepared for when I finally whipped that cover off and revealed the very first production 572 crate engine. Man, the phones at GM Performance literally rang off the hook as people tried to find out more about this massive engine. Now wait a minute, let me repeat that to you. This is a 572 cubic inch engine. It's been dynoed at 620 horsepower at the flywheel, and it's kicking out 650 foot-pounds of torque. To go with that big old hunk of horsepower, a built B&M Turbo 400 was wrestled into place, and then the whole lethal combination was laid to rest between the frame rails. Man, is that awesome or what? But we weren't quite finished yet. No. We needed more gears for high-speed driving. So, in went a gear vendor's overdrive. And then, finally, with the drivetrain in, we were able to permanently mount the saddles to the axle and set our pinion angle. We'll be back with more Copperhead after this. Welcome back to Trucks and our recap of this whole Copperhead thing. Now, when we left off, I had a rolling chassis and a drivetrain, but I still had a few things to do before I could put the body on. Here they are. The first thing was to mount all of our pulleys and brackets and check the fit. Now here's how our inner fenders are going to mount. Notice how everything tucks down into this dead area here. Like I said before, man, it's all about the details. Then we slid in a custom drive shaft that's not supposed to ever break. Yeah, we'll see about that one. Now the exhaust system took things even wilder as I installed a dual custom exhaust system with twin electric exhaust cutouts. That'll make this truck just as loud as it is fast. I flip the switch, open up the exhaust cutout, that bypasses my main exhaust, and now I'm running straight pipe right out of the 572, out the side, into the side of his head. And this is the last thing he's gonna hear before I uncork this thing and give him a really good look at my tail end. As with any project like this, there is always some fabricating and designing that needs to be done to make everything fit just right. Finally, we topped everything off with a special air cleaner. Oh yeah. There, now you can see all that extra work it took to make this thing fit just right. Definitely worth it. At this point, it was all in, but not finished. So, next I pulled the whole drivetrain out, painted and detailed the engine, while advanced plating chromed the special valve covers. Now, while all this was going on, the cab and the body rolled out of the paint shop, and they were looking good, because Kevin Tates at Paintification had spent hours smoothing it down and shooting it with a special PPG copper color that Ron Payton and I had created for this project. The next stop was inside the cab to locate our new seat positioning, and then fabricate some brackets so when we're ready to put them in, they just bolt into place. You want to make sure that the seat is sitting high enough So you're looking through the center of the windshield, not through the bottom, not through the top, right through the center. Make sure that you're planning ahead on your project, because if not, you might work yourself into a corner. With the sound deadening and carpet in place on the floor, it was time to modify our dash. So, in with some performance gauges, and instead of a stock dash, we installed this super slick matching cluster and glove box to really make the interior pop. Finally, some custom interior panels finished it all off. When we come back, the body goes back together. Now, when we left off, it was time to start putting this body back together. So let's get to it. Hold on, because here we go. The first step was to lower the cab back down on the chassis, check all our clearances and fit, and then bolt it down. Next, it was time to start putting the bed together. And even though every one of these parts are reproductions, the bed went together really easily. Now, if you spend a little time fine-tuning the fit, this will look as good or better than any original bed. Now, if you don't have lifting equipment like this, you're gonna need at least 4 buddies to come in here and help you set this down on here. That's it, so you don't scratch the paint. Buddy, we are on. We finished off the rear with taillights and a stock style bumper, and then it was time to move forward into the cab. The first thing to go in was the steering column and the steering wheel, and then we'll position the column in the cab where we want it. Now, you need to take your time here, because this is where you make it fit how you want it to fit. And then we not only installed power windows, but we converted the doors to one-piece glass while we were at it to get rid of that vent wing. Now, with the doors all assembled and looking good, it was time to install them on the cab. And adjust them. And the striker plate itself goes on the outside. Now, and adjust them. And adjust them until everything fit perfect. So be prepared to spend a little time here, fitting, checking, tweaking, until it's perfect. And you can get it perfect even without weather stripping in there. Man, that looks nice, especially with that shaved drip rail. Then, finally, it was time to move on to the front end. And this old rig slowly began to transform into a more and more recognizable truck with each piece that we put on. Now, this is by far the most rewarding step of any build-up, because you can finally step back and take a look at your creation for the first time and see how it's going to look. Step back, take a look at this thing. Is that sweet or what? Well, there it is. We're all up to date. And once they get to this point, well, it's just a matter of doing your plumbing and your wiring and your detail work, which we're going to do. But like I said before, I still have one big surprise for you on this project. And that is that you're going to have to wait till next week to see it. Oh man, don't you hate that? Welcome to Trucks. I've got a great show planned for you today, because I finally get to roll Copperhead back into the shop and finish up some of the details on it. And I know a lot of you have been waiting to see that. Now, like I always say, the final details on any project are always the most tedious, always the most time-consuming, and definitely the most important, because this is what decides the final fit, the final finish, the actual look of your project. And if you get in a hurry here, you are gonna regret it. Now, you need to spend time deciding what products you're going to use, how you're going to install them, so everything fits together and works right. Now, you've got a lot of choices on a body style this popular. We're going to show you some of them. The first thing we're going to deal with is the wiring harness. And the choices that you've got here are to go with an original style harness or a custom harness. Now, if it's an original one you're after, you can get those from Early Classic Enterprises. They've got them to go under the dash, up under the hood, and of course back to your taillights. Now, when I say original, I mean original, right down to the way the fuse block is set up, to your fittings and your plug-ins, heck, even the way the wires are wrapped. If you are doing an original style restoration, or even a modified restoration where you're using a lot of original parts, this is the harness you want to go with. Now, if you're doing a truck like this, where nothing is original, gauges are different, the steering column's different, the engine's different, an original style harness is not your best bet because nothing's going to fit. Now, you need to look at something like this. This kit is from Painless Performance, and it is made specifically for the 67 through 72 GM trucks. So you've got a fuse block that bolts pretty much into the stock location, and it's been upgraded with modern style blade fuses. Now, another unique feature is that every wire is marked down its whole length exactly where it goes. So it's pretty much impossible to hook these up wrong unless you're just not paying attention. Now, another cool feature is how long the wires are. This gives you the option of running the wiring up out of the way however you want to do it. Now, obviously, hooking this up is a little more time consuming than just plugging in an original harness, but this is the best for our application. Now don't worry, this is not as tough as it looks. Okay, now that we've got this painless wiring harness all laid out and we know where everything's going to go, it's time to do something about our heat and air conditioning, because you definitely want to lay that out before you go any further and before you get your interior in. Now, of course, you've got a couple choices on that. They're both over here on the table. Okay, for the 67 through 72 GM trucks, both of your choices come from Vintage Air, and the first one, from here over, is made specifically for these models of trucks. Now, it takes your whole heater, blower, evaporator assembly and moves it from under the hood to under the dash. Now, of course, when you put all of this under your dash, well, you're going to lose a little bit of your glove box. So the kit also comes with this little glove box insert, so you at least have something. Now, of course, you get all the bracketry, the hoses, the hardware, the condenser, the compressor, everything you're going to need to put air in your truck. But one of the most unique features is this little panel. This is a firewall cover, slides down over the firewall, covers these stock ugly holes, just screws in place, and allows all your fittings to come out here. Now, as you can see, this is considerably cleaner than the original setup, which came up to about here and took up half your engine bay. This will be the setup that most of you guys will want to use. Now, let's say you want to smooth the firewall down even more. You don't even want this sticking out. Well, you need a different system. That is the Gen 2 system. Now, this system is a very compact, universal fit heat and air system. You have your heater and your blower and your evaporator all wrapped into one tight little package, much smaller than this. Now, you also have a flat area here. This is what goes up against your firewall. And then with this kit, you also get the condenser and the compressor, all your lines, all your hoses, wiring, controls, everything to make this a complete system. Now, you're probably wondering, well, if the lines come out here, where do they go through the firewall? And the answer is wherever you want them. That is what this fancy little bulkhead is for. Lines go in there, through the firewall, and out here. This is a very clean, Very smooth, very low profile look. Now, as you probably guessed, this system's a little tougher to put in than that one because this is universal fit. That means you get to make it fit. But this is the one we're going to use because we're going to smooth that firewall down. So the first thing we need to do is mock this evaporator into place. Hey, welcome back to Trucks, where I'm finishing up some of the final details on Project Copperhead and showing you some choices you have when you lay out your own project. Now, I've already got the wiring and the air conditioning all laid out. Now it's time to deal with a very common problem area on an old truck, the firewall. It is ugly. Now, hold on, we got some choices for you to fix that. First, of course, you can weld in some panels, then you can smooth it down and paint it. Of course, that looks awesome. Problem is, that takes a lot of work. You basically need to disassemble the whole truck to do it. Or, you've got another option. It looks just as good or better. It's a lot easier, something most people can do, and that is to make a custom panel to cover the firewall. First, make a pattern of the shape you want on a cardboard template. Then, transfer the shape to the material that you want to use. In this case, I'm using polished stainless steel. Then, cut it out. Now, dress the edges, drill your holes, and finally, mount it on. Now, was that slick or what? Now, the best part about doing it this way is you can use stainless steel, you can use aluminum, you can use regular steel and paint everything. You can roll beads in it. This is where your imagination comes in. You can make this look exactly how you want. And if you don't like it, well, just build another one and change it. Look how a different style panel completely changes the look of this firewall. Now, the most important thing here, though, is to spend the time to make it fit right. All your edges need to be straight, bolts need to be evenly spaced, so when somebody walks up and looks at it, they go, man, where'd you buy that? Is that factory? That's what you want. Okay, anytime you start talking about final details, plumbing always comes up. And if you want something special, you need to go to Pure Choice Motorsports, because when it comes to plumbing, they've got it all. Take a look at this. They got complete systems for your brakes, hard lines, hoses, got power steering setups, heater hoses, transmission cooler kits, fuel system, air conditioning, heck, you name it. Matter of fact, Pure Choice is the only place I know of where you can completely plumb your vehicle with one phone call. All right, let's take a look at the brake system we're going to use. For hard lines, Pure Choice has got this high quality, seamless stainless steel line. Then, of course, you've got all kinds of AN fittings to go with them. And then they've got these really slick little banjo fittings to go on your master cylinder. These are cool. Then for hoses, we've got braided stainless steel hoses. Then to hold everything in place, we've got some polished stainless steel clamps. Now to adjust the system, we've got a proportioning valve. And to help us build the system, we've got this little bending tool. Now this will allow you to make some of the tightest bends that you can imagine. Now, one thing that is very important when you are working on stainless steel lines, you have got to do a 37-degree single flare with an AN fitting on the ends. If you try to do a 45-degree double flare like you would on a normal system, you are going to get leaks. This is probably one of the biggest mistakes that people make when they do stainless steel lines. All right, speaking of leaks, time to take a break. We'll be right back. Hey, welcome back. Today we are doing some plumbing on Project Copperhead, and it's time to do some air conditioning lines, power steering lines, and of course heater hoses. Now in the past, you haven't had a lot of really good choices here. You could use original style lines that were kind of ugly and never quite the right length, and you had to cut them down, or you could have somebody custom make them for you, but wouldn't it be nice if you could just make them yourself? Well, now you can with these kits from Pure Choice Motorsports. Now this is a setup for power steering. Notice you have the different size hoses and all the fittings that you need. This is for air conditioning. Once again, different size hoses, compressor fittings, bulkhead fittings, and of course this is for the heater. Now the best part about this Pure Choice stuff is all you have to do is cut the hose to the length you need, put the fittings on, and boom, you have a custom hose, exactly the length you want it. All the fittings are right, no leaks, no hassles, and the best part is, all your hoses match. That is the way it should be. Now look at this. The last piece of plumbing that we got from Pure Choice is this fluid cooler. Now I know this looks a little different, but check this out. Your fluid runs in here. It goes through a series of internal baffles and fins. All that heat dissipates out through the aluminum body and these big exterior fins. Something like this will actually cool better while you're sitting in traffic, no airflow, than a conventional style cooler. Now add to that, it's low profile, it'll mount right on your frame rail if you want it to, and you've got a pretty slick setup. Now, that takes care of all of our plumbing. I've got a little surprise for you. Come on over here. Come on, come on. It's back here in my stash. Stop, you stay. Now, obviously, dang it, Copperhead is gonna be really fast. As any hot rodder knows, you can't be too fast or have too much power. So, I thought it was only fitting I put one more surprise under the hood of Copperhead. And that surprise comes from Bottle Blown Racing. Now, Bottle Blown Racing specializes in custom nitrous systems. Yeah, nitrous. Which means they'll custom build you any system from the most exotic to the most simple. Here is what they did for me. There it is. Now, starting with a bunch of hardware from NOS, they plumbed my intake for a 250 shot of nitrous, and it's blowing right into the intake runners. Now, notice all the solenoids are all set up. You get your gauges, your feeds for your fuel and your nitrous. This is a nice setup. Now, some of you might be thinking, man, that is a lot of nitrous. No, not yet. What are these little extra solenoids back here? Well, to be a little extra sneaky, they also put in a 150 shot of nitrous underneath the intake. You won't ever see this, you won't ever know it's there until I trigger those buttons. And hope to heck we're all holding on to something. Now, you can see by the workmanship here, Bottle Blown Racing really does a nice job. Like I said before, if you want a quality nitrous system, you need to call them. Now, if my math serves me correctly, that puts Copperhead at over 1,000 horsepower. That is sick! What are you, nuts? Yeah, I guess we are. Now, to go with that system, we got a couple of blue anodized bottles from NOS. These will go behind the seats. Then, of course, we got all the hoses and all the hardware to make this a nice, easy installation. Now, anytime you start pumping in this much nitrous, you need more fuel. So, we got an auxiliary fuel system to go with our normal fuel system. To take care of that, it's a Mallory Series 140 comp pump, the filter, and of course the regulator. Now, hopefully this gives you an idea of the planning that goes into this stage. You can't do your electrical until you do your accessories. You can't do your plumbing until you know what and where to plumb. So make sure you're taking your time so you don't end up having to do something over. Okay, obviously I still have a few things to hook up here, but once I get them done, it will finally be time to take this thing down the road. Now, I know I've made a big deal about this being the very first production 572 crate engine. It's because that is a big deal. But now that they've become available, well, a lot of guys are using these on their projects. Now, one guy in particular is none other than Jay Leno. Now, Leno took one of those huge engines and put it in a 55 Buick. And it's a cool car. And it's really fast. But come here, take a good look at that picture. He looks a little smug, doesn't he? Kind of like he's calling you out. So Jay, what do you say we take that old fancy Buick, run it against my old truck? Now, it's just an old truck, and it's got some nice paint on it, and not much more. Let's drag that Buick out and see what it'll really do. That is, unless, of course, you're scared. What do you guys think? You think Jay's scared? I don't know what he'd have to be scared of. Guess we'll just have to find out. Hey, welcome to Trucks. Got a question for you. What do you think is the most tedious and time-consuming part to a full-on project like Copperhead here? Putting in the engine and tranny, laying out the suspension, doing the interior? These are all good guesses, but the truth is, It's in the final assembly. That's when you need to make all this aftermarket stuff work together. And trust me, sometimes they don't want to work together. But if you take your time, take each step as it comes, before you know it, you'll be done. Now obviously I am down to those final steps on Copperhead here. But remember, almost nothing on this truck is original, which brings up some interesting questions. What am I going to do about the radiator and the fans? And how about the linkage and the wiring? And how am I going to get gas in the tank? That is what I'm going to show you today, how to solve some of these problems. The first thing we're going to deal with is the radiator. Now what we're using is this big aluminum radiator that we got from Be Cool. Now this not only has the capacity to cool an air-conditioned big block, which obviously we have, but it also has all the fittings for the heater and the transmission, and the housing is completely polished. So this thing is going to look awesome in that engine bay. The radiator just slides into place and sits right on the factory rubber mounts on the bottom. Now this is where you can run into a little bit of a problem, because notice that the stock rubber mount for the top is nowhere near fitting. This radiator is a lot taller. But if you pick up one of these universal pieces from Transdap, that can be made to fit real easily with just a little bit of tweaking. First, set it in place and mark and drill your holes. Then modify the factory rubber mounts. And finally, bolt it in. Okay, for fans, I've got something that you're really going to like. This is a dual electric fan system from Old Air Products, made specifically for the 67 through 72 GM trucks. Now obviously it's got dual electric fans. Main fan runs all the time. Auxiliary fan comes on only when you need it. And everything is all wired up. You got your thermostat and your wiring and your relays. Basically all you do is plug in a couple of wires. Now the best part is this whole assembly slides right in place of your ugly stock fan shroud. Now that's really cool down here on the bottom, but since this radiator made us change these upper mounts, we're going to have to make this work. Okay, here's what I did. I fabricated a bracket that bolts to the top of the fans here, runs over and utilizes two existing holes here in this upper bracket. Simple, clean, and very strong. As you can see, it is not hard to fabricate pieces and make things work. It just takes a little time to decide where you want to go with it. All right, now, radiator hoses. Now obviously, we are not going to use stock rubber hoses on an engine like this. First of all, we'd never find anything that would fit properly. Second of all, it would look really bad on an engine this nice. No, this is more what we're looking for. Yeah. Unfortunately, you are not going to find something like this in a box and then just bolt it on. Nah, you need to make this. Here's how to do it. This is flexible stainless steel tubing that we got from Earl's Performance Plumbing, and it is specifically designed for custom making radiator hoses. Now all you do is cut it to the length that you need and then just bend it into whatever shape that you want. Then once that's done, all you do is put on the hose end that best fits your application. Once you're done, just polish it and clamp it in place. Then we are ready to move on to the interior. Now obviously, this interior is almost finished, but now is a good time to talk about door handles. This is what I'm going to be using. I got these from Billet Specialties, and they'll slide right onto the factory stub. And then we'll just cover it with the armrest. Now that is a nice look. Looks really good with the door panel and those window switches. Now, how about the gas pedal? Made a call to low car, got this big chrome one. That's for those of us with a really heavy foot. And then to go with that, also got one of their braided stainless steel throttle cables. Now these will not only look a lot better than what was in here originally, but it'll make it a lot easier to hook it up to that new engine. Now, what about this nitrous bottle? We're not just going to leave it out there in the open for everybody to see, are we? Ah, I saved the best for last. This is a custom console built to my special specifications by Kevin Lindemood at Heavy's Customs. And as you can see, he did an awesome job. You've got matching leather and matching design and matching upholstery, even a functional armrest. But it gets really fun underneath that armrest. Yeah, there's my nitrous bottle. And you only think that this is an ashtray. That's actually my weapon system. Yeah, just like James Bond. I've got the nitrous purge and the nitrous arming system and switches to open up my dual exhaust cutouts. All kinds of cool stuff. Take a look at this. That holds my gauges for my nitrous system and my auxiliary fuel system. Of course, up here on the shifter, there's the controller for the gear vendor's overdrive. Everything's all hidden up here nice, making this the ultimate sleeper. Is this cool or what? Now, I'm going to take a break, hook up the nitrous. We'll see you when I get back. Hey, welcome back to Trucks. We are in the middle of one of the final shows of the buildup of Project Copperhead, a 67 Chevy truck that started out as a frame and a cab here in the shop. Now, I'm dealing with a lot of the questions that you guys have asked about the final details on this project. How am I going to hook it all up and make it work right? And one of the biggest things that people ask about is the fuel tank. Of course, that's because one of the first modifications that people want to do to an old truck is get that gas tank out of the cab and relocate it under the bed of the truck. Now, finding a gas tank to go under the bed, well, that's the easy part. Getting gas down to it, that doesn't come with any kit. You are on your own for that. But this is a slick way to do it. Now, this polished stainless steel tank that we got from Early Classic Enterprises fits up nicely between the frame rails and the cross members in the rear. The filler neck is centered right beneath one of the bed planks. So, first we'll just mark the location of the filler neck on the bottom of the plank. Then, remove the plank. Next, drill a small hole in the center of your mark. This is for the center of the filler neck. Now, to get to that filler neck down on the tank, we're going to go through this polished aluminum cap that we got from Style & Concepts. Now, this is actually made for a PT Cruiser because it's the only one that's small enough to fit into the wooden plank between the metal strips. Now, the trick here is to recess this down into the wood so it's all flush for a nice, smooth, clean look. So, don't even expect to be able to use this factory mounting hardware. No, you're going to need to make this fit yourself. So, first thing we're going to do is center it over the hole we drilled and then make a mark here for the big cut. Then, cut out the center hole. Next, using a router, cut the groove for the outer ring. Now, what you want is for the cap to fit flush with the wood, so be careful that you don't go too deep. Once you're happy with the fit, treat the wood with the sealer where you made your cuts. Then mount the cap and replace the plank. And there you have it. A slick little fuel door mounted down into the bed, and the polished aluminum matches the polished aluminum strips and the bed wood and the stainless hardware. Now the best part is, because this is flush mounted, well, you can still use this bed to carry stuff if you want to. Yeah, right. Now, that takes care of the bed of Copperhead. Let's take one last look inside this interior. Now you can see how well this all came together. We started with a two-tone look in the door panels, carried it through into the seats and into the center console. Of course, all that sneaky performance stuff is well hidden in the console, waiting its turn. Of course, in the dash, we got performance gauges. Everything is accented with polished aluminum. Definitely a nice place to spend some seat time. Now, I've got one more thing to show you out front. You know, there comes a time in every project when that last piece has been put on and you can finally step back and take a look at what you've created. And for Copperhead, that time is now. This cowl induction hood was the last piece to put on to finish off the look of this truck. And man, what a truck. Remember though, this thing started out as just a frame, a cab, and a title. And the whole idea here was to show you what is involved in this kind of buildup. And if you take your time and don't get discouraged, well, even the roughest project will eventually turn into something that you can be proud of. Now, the big question, how does it run? Well, I'm not gonna tell you, I'm gonna show you, but not today. No, we're out of time. You have to wait just a little bit longer. But me, I don't have to. Hey, welcome to Trucks. You know, the purpose of this show has always been to show you how to do stuff. You know, the tools and techniques it takes to hand build something of your very own. But every once in a while, the time comes to put the tools down and see just exactly what it is that you've created. And today on Trucks is one of those days. You know, without a doubt, one of the most popular trucks I've ever built is this little '67 Chevy called Copperhead. But why? Well, the reasons are pretty obvious. The 67 through 72 GM trucks are without a doubt one of the best looking trucks ever built. And there are so many parts available for them that you can literally start with a frame and a cab and you can build this truck. I've been telling you that from the very beginning. But telling you that and proving it to you, that's two different things. This is the proof. Now, I know a lot of you have been following this project from the very beginning and you're just dying to see it all come together and hear that big 572 finally kick to life. Well, guys and girls, this is Copperhead. Starting at the very bottom, the frame and the chassis were the first two things to be brought back to life with all new components. What I'm starting with is literally a '67 cab, a frame, and of course a title. You gotta have a title, you don't have a truck without that. Remember, by breaking your big project into smaller sub-projects, you not only keep everything more organized, but you're also able to keep the project moving along and give you a sense of accomplishment. The drivetrain was next. And with that came the introduction of Chevy's new 572 crate engine. Now this sucker not only kicks out a massive 620 horsepower on pump gas, but this is also the very first production engine, which makes this truck definitely one of a kind. We backed up all that power with a built turbo 400 tranny and an overdrive, so this thing will run down the road as well as get off the line. And at this point, people were beginning to understand why I had named this truck Copperhead. It's a very potent street machine disguised in the unlikely body of a pickup truck. The paint and body were the next stage, and to go with the name Copperhead, and to add to the illusion that this is just a fancy show truck that you'd only drive once in a while, we created a special PPG color called Copperhead Metallic, and it looks good even on a cloudy day. And then we started putting it all back together using a combination of reproduction, NOS, and original parts, proving once again that you've got a lot of options when it comes to building one of these trucks. Ah, the interior. That is a whole step in itself. And once again, with these body style trucks, you have a tremendous amount of choices. From bone stock to full-on custom. And the only limit is your imagination and, of course, your budget. Yeah, easier said than done. Don't underestimate this step. This is where most people get discouraged and give up, usually because of bad planning or unforeseen problems that they weren't prepared for. And then all of a sudden, it's done. Now, did I hit my goal? Do I have something that can be a full-on show rig when it needs to be, but something that's reliable and functional enough to be a daily driver, but at the same time can transform itself into the fastest, baddest, nastiest thing on the street? Is that even possible? Well, sure it is. Check it out. The first stop for Copperhead upon completion was not just any old car show. It went to one of the biggest, the SEMA show in Las Vegas, where it sat on display in the Chevrolet booth to represent the crate motor program with the very first production 572 crate engine bulging out from under the hood. This was a tremendous honor for an old truck that was just a derelict frame and cab just a few years ago. The response to the truck was overwhelming. People swarmed around it, looking, pointing, asking questions. It was great. I even had some time to spend with Jay Leno, who had his awesome 67 Toronado on display right beside us.
You may notice it's shaved the drip rails because it always looked like a big eyebrow on these things.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, yeah. Well, it's all subtle. It's wonderfully done.
Keep it real slick.
Beautiful. Yeah, yeah.
Anyway, the SEMA show was great. The truck was a huge hit. But that's only a small part of what this truck is. The biggest part we're going to cover when we come back, because we're going to put you in the passenger seat. We're going to drive this sucker. You know, you better hold on, because I'm about to swing your butt all over that seat. Welcome back to Trucks and the Copperhead Payoff. Now, we already know the truck looks good, but how does it perform on the road? Well, that is what we are going to find out. Come on. All right, we're rolling down the interstate here right at 80 miles an hour. Everything is just smooth as glass. This thing feels like a new truck, which I guess it is. All the gauges are lined up. Everything's functional. We got 60 pounds of oil pressure. Water temperature is 180 degrees. Tachometer's working, volts, fuel. This thing's feeling good. Now, one thing that's really cool that I want to show you is this gear bender's overdrive. Now, I'm running down the road here 70 miles an hour, 3,000 RPMs. I hit the overdrive, drops it down to 2,500, just like that. If I want to go back, hit the button, back to 3,000. It's like a whole nother gear. That's sweet. The first thing we'll want to take a look at is the handling and the road manners. Remember, I didn't get overly exotic with the suspension because you don't need to. New urethane bushings, ball joints, bigger sway bars, quick ratio steering, drop springs and spindles. All this adds up to make this thing handle surprisingly well on the street, especially for a truck with a big heavy engine in the front. All right, big old heavy truck, let's see what you can do here. However, if you start to push this thing on a road course, you'll get the typical understeer entering a curve. But a quick blip of the throttle will bring that rear end right out from under you with oversteer, which would make this truck a handful on a slick or gravel road. But it is a lot of fun on a road course. I tell you what, this quick ratio steering is nice. Even if you're building a truck just to be a street driver, you need to have quick ratio steering. the harder I push on the gas, the more the gas gauge goes down. Why is that? Of course, if you want to play, you gotta pay. Yeah, Scott lost the toss on this one. How's it going, Scott? I gotta watch you, man. Now, rolling down the road, this thing is surprisingly quiet, due largely to all that soundproofing I put on before I put in the carpet and the upholstery. Now, the gauges are big and easy to read. The mirrors are small, but they're functional. Driving position is nice and comfortable. Shifters within easy reach. This is definitely a vehicle that you could drive down the road every day if you'd want to. That takes care of two criteria for Copperhead. One, nice, cool show truck. Two, a nice, reliable daily driver if you want it to be. Now, when we come back, I'm going to flip some switches. We're going to see just how nasty this thing really is. This is awesome. Welcome back to the Copperhead Payoff. We've taken a look at the showability.
We got cutouts in it.
Yeah. And the street ability of this rig. Now it's time to get back to the Nashville Super Speedway and put the pedal down. In the quest to see just how sharp this thing will turn, I found it'll actually turn in its own radius, but not using the steering wheel, just the throttle, which leads us to the conclusion. If you're into drifting, you need to build a truck, because nothing will hang the rear out like a truck. Of course, right about now, it's time to take our increasingly familiar position at the back of the truck. And this is 112?
112.
So nobody's gonna miss these few gallons, are they? You wanna just like pull that tank behind me? The way this stuff's going through there, we're probably gonna need to do that. All right, the tank is full. It's time to find out what kind of top speed this thing's capable of. And with its 60s aerodynamics and its modern power and drivetrain, trust me, this truck's going to be airborne long before it stops accelerating, making 140 miles an hour a nice round number to stop pushing it at. Well, at this point, it's time to stop fooling around and see what this thing will do off the line, with or without slicks. So, after warming up the unfortunate Toyo tires to get as much traction as possible, I'll uncork the headers and turn this sucker loose. Here we go. Now hold on, wait a minute. I'm not really sure you understand what you just saw. Those black marks are over 300 feet long and it was still spinning. It hadn't hooked up yet. Finally, at about 70 miles an hour with the rear end whipping back and forth, I finally lifted the throttle enough to let it hook up. And guys, that was without the nitrous. Amazing. Here, watch it again. Well, there it is, Copperhead. Now this is the best part about this whole deal. We put 250 miles on this thing in 2 days, drove it to the track, flogged the wee out of it, and then drove it back in the dark. No breakdowns, no leaks, no problems. Everything worked exactly like it should. And that is what you want. That's where all the time that you've spent working on the details, making sure they were right, really pays off. Because you don't want breakdowns and problems when it's time to go have fun. Now, a lot of you may be thinking, well, that's great for you, but I can't build a truck like this. Yes, you can. That's the whole point here. You can build your own version of this truck to your skill level and your budget. Man, put a small block in it or keep the stock interior or the stock brakes. Just build something and make it yours. And that brings up one final point I want to make. You're not going to build a truck like this in 6 weeks. You're not going to build it in 6 months. Heck, you're not going to build it in a year. The average gearhead spends 4 years working on this project. So don't get discouraged, because one day it will be time to turn the key and drive out of the garage. And at that point, I have got 2 requests of you. Number 1, that you drive it like you stole it. And number 2, if you ever pull up beside me, you better be ready to run it.